Gravity Falls, a show of humor, mystery, and casual viewing. Unless you're me. My name is Christian. You're probably wondering why I'm dressed as Dipper Pines and about to rewatch the entire series. Rest assured, there's a perfectly logical explanation.
All right, now we move on to Sock Opera, and this is a big episode as far as continuity for the whole series. And the basic premise of the show is that, we get another kind of crush of the week with Mabel, and kind of like with the last episode and a couple of episodes before, this is kind of like trying to wrap up different kind of plot elements that we had from season 1. So we're trying to wrap up Mabel's series of crushes throughout the summer. So this is kind of like one of her final ones before kind of moving on to the rest of the series. And for this crush, it's a character named Gabe Benson, and Gabe Benson is a kid who works at the library, who does puppet shows for all the kids for entertainment, and he's obsessed with puppets. And of course, Mabel is trying to impress him, and of course, his number one love is puppets and puppet shows. So when Mabel tries to flirt with him, he says like, "Oh yeah, I love puppets. Like, when's your next puppet show?" And then Mabel's like, in a week. So then her whole goal is to create this amazing puppet show in order for Gabe to like her back and everything. But at the same time, Dipper is trying to figure out what's going on with the laptop and trying to figure out the different codes for it. And because it's password protected, and once you get the password in, you can finally open the laptop.
There's also a hidden detail on the laptop where the symbol on the home screen is similar to the universal portal, indicating that there's definitely a connection between them.
So he's like obsessively trying to find the right password for it, but it keeps failing, and he tries to enlist Mabel's help, but obviously Mabel is busy trying to prepare for a puppet show. So Dipper's kind of like left by himself, and he's kind of like pulling all-nighters and obsessing over it and kind of like falling asleep. And then during one of the times he gets visited by Bill Cipher, and so we get the return of Bill Cipher finally in the series. And the biggest inspiration for Bill Cipher from Alex Hirsch's point of view is that you wanted to create the perfect antagonist for Dipper, where Dipper is this character who's obsessed with finding answers but can't get any, but the complete opposite of that is someone who has all the answers but doesn't say anything. So that was one of the inspiration for Bill. And then Bill kind of tempts him to kind of make a deal with him in order to give him the secrets for the laptop. But then obviously Dipper doesn't want any part of that. He reminds him of everything that he's done in the past, of like trying to take over Stan's mind and everything like that in Dreamscapers. So he kind of like gets him to go away. But then as time goes on, his obsession becomes more and more, and then Mabel kind of becomes less and less helpful. So then another time where Dipper kind of falls asleep again, then when he puts another password, there's a countdown that says like all the data on the laptop will be erased, and you have one password attempt left. So he kind of becomes desperate. Bill contacts him again and decides to make a deal with him, and it says like, "Hey, I'll finally give you the password." Dipper says, "Okay, what do you want from me?" And then Bill makes a suggestion like, "All I need is like one puppet." And then Dipper's still kind of resistant, but Bill says like, "Time's running out, you gotta make a deal." So then Dipper finally shakes his hand, makes a deal, and Dipper says, "One puppet," is like, "Which one are you gonna choose?" And then Bill's like, "Oh yeah, okay, eeny, meeny, miny, you," which is a line that Stan said in Tourist Trap when he was trying to look for volunteers to put up spooky signs in the forest, which kind of started this whole thing. So then, he takes over Dipper's body.
He mentions that it's been a long time since he inhabited a body, and the identity of that person will definitely be revealed in a future episode.
Dipper's, spirit kind of like lifts out of his body and kind of floats around while Bill Dipper, or Bipper, takes over Dipper's body and like, uses it as a puppet and everything like that, because he realizes that Mabel took the journal as one of the props for the sock opera that she's putting on. So then he goes to the sock opera and tries to go like backstage and try to find the journal and everything like that, because he has this whole grand plan that we find out later on. He talks about in that if Dipper has a journal, it'll ruin everything. So we kind of have like this funny juxtaposition of Bill Dipper trying to take the journal and bring forth his plans, and then we have this kind of epic sock opera that Mabel is trying to put on to impress Gabe. And then of course you have Dipper trying to warn Mabel about everything. And then during like the act break in the show, Dipper possesses a sock puppet and he's like talking to Mabel, warning her about Bill. And you definitely have a lot of Muppets references for sure, which was like the first of many in this episode.
And after Mabel remembers Bill, she tenses her fingers and peers one eye through it, and that gesture will definitely be brought up in a future episode indicating Bill.
So then Mabel eventually realizes that Bill is possessing Dipper, and then kind of uses that to her advantage, because Bill thinks he's like this all-powerful being and everything like that, but he's in the body of like a 12-year-old boy who hasn't slept for like 24 hours and who's like itchy and has mosquito bites and everything like that. So Mabel like runs around like backstage and everything, and Bill Dipper tries to chase after her, and like his body's exhausted, falls to the ground. Bill's spirit kind of lifts out of his body, and then Dipper's able to go back into his own body. So then Bill's kind of like at a loss, and then kind of like disappears characters. They kind of like the grand finale of the sock opera, but everything kind of gets destroyed because of like the fight and everything like that. And like Mabel says like, oh no, this is the part of the program where everyone thinks that all the destruction is part of the show and they're going to cheer and everything, but then they'd all just say like boo and leave and everything. So I think that was like a funny twist on that sort of joke. But then, you know, Dipper and Mabel kind of like have like a heart to heart about how like both of them were acting kind of selfish in a way, and that they've been kind of putting their own wants above the other person, and how they kind of need to learn to sacrifice their own needs to help out the other. So it's a good like lesson overall for the twins. And we also have a couple of Easter eggs here and there of like, one, there's a scene where Dipper kind of goes from like one floor to the other and you see a little listening device from the agents, and then you actually see the agents in the sock opera theater, you know, looking through their playbills. So it's definitely like another kind of blink and you miss it throughout the first couple episodes of the first half of this season, where like the agents are still on the trail of the main characters. So I thought that was really cool for sure. And after Bill takes over Dipper's body, he actually raised up the laptop and smashes it to the ground, and you know, that kind of sets up the events of a future episode where we actually see a little label on there. It kind of shows that like Bill had no intention of honoring the deal for Dipper, and the stuff on the laptop probably wasn't even that important at all, but Bill kind of like made it that way just so that he could take over Dipper's body and then get his hand on the journal. And Dipper and Mabel finally call themselves Mystery Twins, which was a name that Seuss gave them back in Rational Treasure, but Dipper was kind of about it. But now that, you know, the twins are kind of like closer than ever, he kind of officially calls them the Mystery Twins. So I think that was a really nice touch for sure.
We also got several cryptograms in this episode. In Dipper's journal during the musical montage, there's a cryptogram, and after using the at-batch cipher, it decodes to pure energy, not skin and bone, rising like a shepherd tone. Also during the scene where Dipper's trying to find more passwords, there's a piece of paper in the background titled Codes, and when decoded using the Caesar cipher, they read whittle, shifter, whatevs, and barrow, and the first three are keywords from previous episodes, and the last word is the name of Mabel's childhood stuffed bear, as seen in the Gravity Falls short called Tooth, and the keyword for the next episode. And during the end credits of the episode, we get another cryptogram, and once decoded using the Key Visionaire cipher, it reads, we've all had some fun tonight, but let us not forget who the real puppet masters are, reptoids who've infiltrated the government, and the keyword is cipher, and it's found in the mirror's reflection after Bill takes over Dipper's body. And finally, during the page section at the end of the episode, we get 4 different number sequences, and after being put through all the ciphers, it translates to, no puppet strings can hold me down, so patiently I watch this town, abnormal soon will be the norm. Enjoy the calm before the storm, which is definitely a reference to I Have No Strings on Me from Pinocchio.
And yeah, definitely setting up a lot of like future storylines for sure, not only with Bill, but just like the relationship between Dipper and Mabel. So I think that was really good for sure.